Even though we're less than 5 weeks into 2021, it's already been a huge year for crypto. Bitcoin and a number of other cryptocurrencies have already hit new all time highs since January 1st. Beyond that, though, events like the Capitol riots and Wall Street Bet's big short squeeze have also changed the conversation around crypto. Additionally, Janet Yellen, the Treasury pick of the incoming Biden administration in the United States, has already raised concerns about how crypto is being used and how regulators need to consider stepping up their game. Therefore, even though 2020 was a huge year for crypto regulation in the US and abroad, 2021 could be even bigger. Finance magnates recently sat down with Jackson Mueller, Director of Policy and Government Relations at Securrency, to speak about the future of cryptocurrency regulations in the US and internationally. Jackson is a specialist in government affairs and advocacy, public policy, financial services, and financial technology, who's worked in the industry for more than 10 years. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is FMTV. Jackson, such a pleasure to finally meet you in person, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. A lot of developments going on right now, so it's great to be on with you and try to have a informative discussion. For
Yeah,
your
yeah, definitely a very, very exciting time. So I know who you are. Can you tell our listeners who might not know a little bit about yourself and also the work that you do?
Sure. So I guess for your listeners, my name is Jackson Mueller. I'm a director of policy and government relations at Securrency. Our headquarters is based just outside of Washington, D.C., although we have various offices both here in the U.S. and then around the world, and in particular in Abu Dhabi. But I guess before I start talking about, go into a little bit about Securrency, it's probably worth providing a little bit of background as well, and how I got here. I've spent about more than a dozen years now in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm actually based in Northern Virginia. So for those of you in the policy and regulatory spheres in the U.S., feel free to reach out to me. But stumbled around like a young kid just out of college, had a political science degree, and really started to get my feet on the ground running when I joined the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, and that's the big capital markets trade group here in the U.S. And focused a lot on finance and policy. And this was around the time that the Jobs Act was being implemented, and the ramifications for capital raising and liquidity and that sort of thing. And I got very interested in that, and especially what that meant for some of these alternative financing platforms such as crowdfunding and that sort of thing. And that's when I really got into financial technology. Now, if you recall, back in 2014. It was when I joined the Milken Institute and their Center for Financial Markets. FinTech was lending and payments, and that was largely it, right?
Hmm.
But of course, when people say FinTech now, I don't even know what you're referring to, and that's how explosive the term has become over the years, and certainly it keeps expanding rather than contracting. So. At the Milken Institute, spent a ton of time on fintech related issues, working with several former colleagues of mine. We jump started the financial technology program there, and for a good 6.5 years, I put together a number of documents and research covering all sorts of areas of the fintech space. Lending and payments, but then obviously as the fintech term expanded, we went into reg tech and subtech, and then also explored a little bit on virtual bank licensing regimes, and that's something that the paper is coming out in a few months on that.
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned. So at the Milken Institute, I was able to get my kind of feet wet in the intersection of finance policy and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And was really, diving deep in a number of those issues. But after 16.5 years of writing about what all of you are doing in this space, I decided, let's take a little chance and see, can I carry this forward into an advocacy role and really engage with regulators and policymakers, on the benefits of what I'm seeing out there from technological innovation. And so thankfully, I joined Securrency back in June of 2020. I don't even know what year it is now. So just, long story short about, kind of why I joined Securrency. One, we consider ourselves both a fintech and a reg tech company. Really we're building technology that enables institutional adoption in the digital asset space, but at the same time, we're enabling regulators to effectively oversee the market in a responsible manner. So as much as we are providing the rails that allow for institutional adoption in this space, at the same time, we are coordinating, engaging with a number of regulatory bodies on, how the digital, on compliance in the digital asset space. And I think what really drove me to Securrency in particular, what was their focus on compliance, and we've been focused on it since 2015, since Dan Donnie, our CEO, really jump-started the business. And after my various documents on RegTech and SubTech, and really finding that Securrency is kind of best positioned here. We're kind of the in-between between industry and regulatory authorities, and so I thought this was a perfect position to dive into. And so I've been here since June. I think that's a few months ago, and really I have a lot of respect for our executive leadership team. In particular, we've, what else? It's another big draw for me joining Securrency. We have a number of, Navy vets here, a Marine Corps veteran.
Wow.
Our CEO was very much involved, and I believe was the first chief innovation officer at the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. So really, hats off to those guys. And I think that experience has really shaped the core focus of this company, which is on, compliance and interoperability. And I think, in particular, when you look at some of the challenges in this space, from an interoperability, especially the digital asset space, from an interoperability perspective, how do you get these various infrastructures, both new and legacy, to talk to each other, right? And in addition to that, on the compliance side, there's obviously different regulatory jurisdictions out there that are focused in some ways, shape, or form on the digital asset space. They have different compliance regimes, for securities regulations. There's a lack of harmony. So how do you bridge that, right? So how do you bridge the interoperability perspective, but then also from a compliance side? And I think, without going into the technical specifics of what we do, because honestly, you should talk to Dan. He'll blow your mind over 3-4 hours of discussion on what we're really up to. But from a quick non-technical explanation of what we do, we've built a policy engine as well as a compliance oracle that really provides users with an intuitive way to codify multi-jurisdictional regulations. And in addition to that, we build those into a smart contract that's really capable of determining not only whether a particular transaction can take place, and not only whether it's permissible or not, but that it allows for instantaneous clearing across borders. And so we think, when we're building a liquid, we're creating the framework and standards around a liquid global environment that enhances access to capital. That's a huge aspect of it. But that's only the compliance part. So what do you do on the interoperability side? Well, the technology itself that we're building also allows for that token to move both outside of its native blockchain ecosystem and environment, but also across other distributed ledgers and even non-blockchain environments, so legacy infrastructures as well, without losing those compliance characteristics. So that is a huge aspect. So not only are we dealing with the interoperability issues, but we're also dealing with the compliance issues as well. And in building this kind of global liquid environment that really allows for the movement of all sorts of value across various infrastructures, and really allows greater access to liquidity in our view anyway. So that's kind of a long story short. Again, I'd love to have you and Dan on to talk more about the technical aspects of it. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk about it. But yeah, a couple months in, and really just at least in my role from a policy and regulatory perspective, it's how best do we communicate what we're doing to policymakers, whether they be on Capitol Hill or elsewhere around the world, as well as regulators, and how best do we engage and show off our technology that really, I think, addresses a number of pain points that have been exposed, whether through various regulatory documents and also requests for comments, but then also policymakers, in various hearings and that sort of thing. So that is what I'm attempting to do. I'm still here, so I still think I'm doing a good job. But yeah, happy to answer any additional questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it sounds like you guys are up to some really quite amazing and important stuff. So where at this point, where is Securrency in terms of its sort of life cycle? Have you guys managed to get clients? What are you up to at this moment in a practical sense?
Yeah, so I think obviously we started in 2015. We've had 5 years. We're obviously continuing to build. We had a successful Series A, and we are continuing to engage with a number of those financial institutions that invested with us, and then also speaking to a number of other institutions who are growing increasingly interested in this space and wondering how they can get in and provide liquidity in a highly compliant manner. And so we are having those discussions, and we are engaging with a number of institutions in this space, but also from a regulatory perspective as well. As much as I talk about the institutional side, we're very much engaged with regulatory bodies around the world. And, in particular, we've conducted several demonstrations and pilots with multilateral institutions, but then also some of the top securities regulators around the world, being able to showcase our technology and demonstrate the capabilities of how our technology can address a number of their pain points when it comes to exploring decentralized finance. And so those discussions and engagements are ongoing. This is not like a flip of the switch and everyone just shows up, right? I think we're seeing a ton of success from those discussions, and obviously we're certainly making a headway from a policy angle too. We've had a number of conversations with lawmakers, frankly, who just trying to roll out the red carpet and say, hey, this is us and this is what we do, and it's been some phenomenal feedback, because I think some of the questions raised around interoperability, compliance, privacy, security, that sort of thing, really dovetails into what we've been able to do and accomplish and build over the last couple of years. And so we're really we're obviously hitting the ground running, and we'll have certainly more developments to announce later this year. Okay,
very, very exciting stuff. So I wanted to ask you about something we talked about briefly actually before this interview started, which is just the crazy amount of developments that have happened this year in terms of kind of regulations that affect the fintech and crypto space in the U.S. as well as outside of the U.S. abroad. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of trends you see happening, and perhaps also what the most important things you think have happened in the last 6 months to a year?
Yeah, so I mean, my work at the Milken Institute and then on to Securrency, I've been focused on the regulatory and policy positioning and around a number of fintech related issues. Obviously, since I'm now more in the digital assets space, a little more condensed view. But nonetheless, it's been pretty active over the last several months, and frankly, I credit Brian Brooks for single-handedly keeping me employed in my current position, because I got to say, I mean, what he did over the last several months is pretty is pretty amazing, especially coming out of the regulatory body like the OCC. That years ago, I remember when Tom Curry was head of the agency, and it was they were just starting to wade into this space and just starting to figure out what needs to happen from a regulatory and policy perspective, and really kind of setting the frameworks by which the OCC was going to move forward. And then you have Brian that's just like hitting the go button, right? Let's go. Let's put it out there. Let's get requests and for comment, and then put out some guidance. So obviously, focused, in particular about what's coming out of the OCC, but the beauty of the U.S. and to some firms it might not be as beautiful, but there are so many regulatory authorities in this space. And so, if it's not Brian Brooks putting out stuff, it's the SEC putting together some guidance, or putting out some requests for comment. Their recent comment on custody for special purpose broker dealers is something that we're obviously taking a look at. And then you look at the state regulators as well. You look at what Wyoming has been doing on the SPDI license and that framework, the New York with their BIT license framework. So all sorts of issues, right? And I think it's been really interesting, because it's everyone is actively involved and engaged. And I think that's certainly a positive for this industry. You're getting much more, especially through the various innovation arms from both the state and federal regulators, right? So the SEC obviously has FinHub, OCC's got their fintech office. You've seen a lot of movement out of the CFTC regarding DeFi and the former chairman Tarvert's comments on that space in particular. But then the elevation of these innovation arms to actually standalone offices, which I think is a huge a positive for this space. And certainly, instead of just being a small little cog within an organization, now you're basically, the sitting right next to the chairman of these various regulators. And so that's, interesting from a US perspective. And then also from an international perspective, you're obviously seeing a lot of developments as it relates to multilateral developments, in particular on stable coins, but in particular, and then also CBDC. It just seems like every central bank has decided within the last year that I need to put out a report, right? And so I think that's incredibly interesting. I think it's a net positive for the industry in trying to figure out exactly how these regulators view different types of assets in this space and how they're going to approach. I think you're starting to see even grander policy and regulatory developments. If you're thinking of, from a European perspective, the markets and crypto assets regime that they're putting out. The UK just announced, their crypto asset framework, which really actually dovetails more into the stablecoin effort. And I think, if you're involved in the stablecoin business right now, I mean, there's a lot of work cut out for you over this year in particular, but over the next several years. So, obviously a lot of developments in this space. And I think it's also interesting to see that more and more regulatory bodies are engaging in pilot efforts as well. Not just, focusing on the crypto side of things, but also, what does DLT mean for various financial sector issues, and how can we create a more efficient, responsive, system that can actually improve costs and create greater access. So I think those are, from a regulatory perspective, there's some very interesting things there. I will say, given that we are, just had an election, and obviously, the Biden administration is moving in, or I guess has moved in as of yesterday. Um, there's going to be, I would argue, there's going to be a lot of focus, on, at least on the policy angle in the beginning, on even more AML KYC activity as it relates to crypto. And the reason I say that is, you had a chain analysis blog. I don't know if you saw it a couple days ago, that was talking that basically connected the dots between those individuals that stormed the Capitol and some of the cryptocurrency that they were able to receive.
Oh my God. No, I didn't see
Days
that.
beforehand, right? That then made its way into various publications. And so I can guarantee that that is going to come up in various discussions. And so there's going to be a big emphasis, at least in the beginning, because there's, people are still traumatized about what happened a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
about, do we need even more enhanced KYC AML on this type of activity? And frankly, I think this puts the, one of the big issues right now for industry, as it relates to unhosted wallets, and what came out of FinCEN and in Treasury right before Christmas, which was just grand. Their focus on identification and greater AML, KYC related requirements. And I think, given what has happened, and given the fact that other jurisdictions are also enhancing their AML KYC regimes, and then on top of that, what Janet Yellen said the other day during the Senate Finance Committee hearing, in which she was still very skeptical of crypto and very concerned about AML KYC related issues, and now she's heading Treasury. There's going to be some significant efforts again on KYC AML, I think, at least for the immediate future. Now, for the medium and longer term, at least for the 117th Congress, you're likely to get the reintroduction of the Stable Act, which basically said that only depository institutions are allowed to issue, stablecoin or stable-backed products, stablecoin products. And hopefully I'm reading that right. I'm not a lawyer, so please take all my advice with a grain of salt. But then in addition to that, I think you're going to see, you've obviously seen greater activity as it relates to, well, rather than just, go at these, these new forms of finance and these new values and just cut them off. Why don't we try and figure out what technology is out there that can help regulators and policymakers, bring greater transparency to this space? And I think that was something that was really lacking out of the Treasury and FinCEN document that they put out, where the request barely, their notice of proposed rulemaking barely shed any light on, okay, what are the technological solutions that are out there? And frankly, I think there are a number of them, and they certainly have to be raised, rather than just saying, hey, let's just cut off the arm here, or the leg of this. And so I think, Ted Budd, one of the representatives, House Representatives, Ted Budd, just recently introduced a fintech bill that would do just that. Frankly, I think that's a move in the right direction. How do we identify and create greater transparency? How do we create greater transparency in these markets by identifying a number of technological innovations that can help us in these markets? And so I think that's a better way, versus just saying, well, let's cut off the arm or leg and don't have to deal with it anymore. So I know that was back and forth, all over the place in terms of what's going on globally, but then also domestically. We're focused on all of this because we're trying to create that the standard that allows for kind of an open, decentralized environment that supports the flow of value across infrastructures and in a highly compliant, multi-jurisdictional way. And so, anything that happens in this space, we got to have an eye and ear on.
Absolutely. It's like, anything that happens in one country almost happens everywhere, because if this is going to be truly interoperable, then it needs to be sort of unilateral solution for everything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. So,
So a lot of a lot of wait and see, since a number of these things are just proposals right now, right? So
right.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and but we don't know what we don't know, so it's going to be very, very interesting over the next few
But
years.
and I would say that so I didn't touch on the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Again, more on the policy aspects of it, but for those who are just trying to figure out exactly what's happening. So Biden's obviously tapped Janet Yellen, the former Fed chair, to be Treasury Secretary. Um, for those in the crypto community in particular, her views, obviously. And I've spoken a little bit about that. Gary Gensler, who is the CFTC chair, is now going to has been tapped as the SEC chair.
Hmm.
So what does that mean? Now, I think, folks especially in the crypto community were like, Clayton's gone, thank God, bring in something new.
Right.
I don't, I think, and this is all hypothetical because I mean this could change over the next 24 hours, and Gary Gensler could obviously have much different perspectives than what I think. But when you look back on what he's written, and some of his opening comments, I still think you get he still shares a lot of the views of Clayton, and the real reason I say that is he wants to figure out how to bring these innovations within the current regulatory frameworks, right? And so of course things may need to change, but at the same time, I think there is he's very focused on investor protection, right? He doesn't want to simply jettison rules and regulations that have been around for decades just because something is new.
Right.
And so I think he will he will largely try and focus on how do we bring this stuff in house, and if we need to tinker with it, if we need to revise it or revisit it, we will. Hang on, my dog is barking.
No problem.
Come on. So anyway, and I think so he shares kind of those same ideals, I would imagine, but then on top of that, I think you could get a much more active SEC, and the reason I say that is Clayton, in my view, and again, take my views with a grain of salt, but he built the car, let's say, right? He built, he put the SEC in a direction, basically built all the components to this, and it's ready to drive. Now, you might not like some of the components of that car, and those components can certainly be taken out and replaced with with something new and something that makes more sense. But I think he's put Gensler in the driver's seat, right? So now Gensler can just hit the pedal and go, and he can basically create the kind of direction that he wants to go in. And I think what's interesting is that in that car, right, in the passenger seat, you're going to have Hester Pierce, right, and in the back seat, you're going to have Valerie Shapanik, right.
Mm-hmm.
So all three, and now that the SEC's FinHub is a standalone agency, you're going to have these three individuals. I would imagine are going to be talking a lot more about the shape of the SEC's approach to this, what needs to change, how do we move forward, and let's put us in a direction where we can be potentially more active. And the reason I say more active is that you've got Hester obviously looking at putting together a safe harbor 2.0 proposal,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got the recent request for comment from the SEC on the on custody issues related to digital assets for special purpose broker dealers, right? I think at some point you're going to start seeing movement on digital ETFs, in this space. And so I think there's going to be certainly a lot of activity over the next year coming out of the SEC, because the car has been built and it's ready to go, and I think Gary Gensler is in a position to really to drive forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very like yeah, exciting stuff for sure.
Now, the only other
Yeah.
thing I'd say, and I know I'm talking like
No,
crazy,
please,
not
please
giving
get
you
lay it on me. I'm
you a
ready for
chance,
it.
and I always do this, so
Yeah.
my apologies, and
Please don't apologize. No
hopefully
problem.
I haven't put anyone to sleep. But I think on the another a couple other interesting things to keep note of. One, what happens with the Fed, and then two, what's going to happen with the OCC.
Yeah.
And so if for all of what Brooks has done, you've got two people in the running, according to several media outlets. So you have MRSA, I believe, and Mercer Banderman. I forget her last name, and I apologize if she's
No
listening.
problem.
And then also you have Michael Barr. Now,
Mhm.
Michael Barr, if for those who don't know him, or at least watch what he's been up to over the last couple of years, he's been with the University of Michigan, but he's also been very interested in the future of central bank, the future central bank, right?
Mhm.
What is it going to amount to? And so a lot of the conversations at the University of Michigan have been focused on CBDC related activity. And obviously he's teaching, I believe he's teaching courses on fintech related issues. And then if you look at MRSA, her prior testimony in various committees, she's very focused on postal banking. In particular, I think she's had a few comments that will should be a concern to the crypto community. And broader fintech community as well.
Mhm.
I don't know, who's in the front seat of that race between the two of them, but that could really reshape how the OCC moves forward on some of these activities. And I'm not sure you get the activity like you did over the last several months, thanks to what Brian put together. So that'll be interesting to see, who comes into that position, and then what happens with this, with the prior guidance and the various things that Brian has done in the past. Do those carry forward? Does the OCC backtrack? Who knows? So again, a lot of this, as it relates to the Biden administration, to be seen, right? We're only on, I think, day 2 or day 1.5, depending on when he.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Although a lot has happened
yeah,
in the last 1.5 days, for sure.
yes, exactly.
Yes. So I wonder about your thoughts, particularly with some of these short-term things, as you mentioned, that there's probably going to be sort of a heavy hand coming down on compliance with KYC and AML in the relatively near future in the United States. What do you think that means, sort of on a practical level, for cryptocurrency exchanges, users, and sort of like the experience of trading, and also possibly the effect on markets themselves?
So I would imagine you see legislation, but obviously it's got to go through the House and the Senate,
Hmm.
right? So those, and it's tough to get legislation through. I mean, even on stuff that has bipartisan backing. I've been covering fintech policy or fintech related issues and policy for years now, and even if something is a great idea with bipartisan backing, it's just tough to get through unless you attach it to some larger bill, and especially like we've seen with the National Defense Authorization Act. There was a number of fintech and digital assets related issues, that provisions that were included in there.
Hmm.
But one of the, I guess one of the things that I've seen over the years is that what binds both sides of the aisle together is through AML KYC. And I think the concern is if we don't get it, that the issues and what's happening in the innovation space, then let's just regulate it.
Mm.
And frankly, so I think over the net, especially with the new Congress coming in, education is going to be critical, right?
Yeah.
And again, you're going to see bills being introduced The question is, are they going to move, and are they going to move fast? And I think, my thoughts on this are, because of that chain analysis piece and the fact that it hit a number of news media, you could get quicker reaction to a bill focused on those aspects, especially AML, enhanced AML KYC on crypto activity, because of that piece and because of what happened 2 weeks ago. Now, I haven't seen anything introduced yet, but I would imagine that has made the rounds on, that article and that blog post has made the rounds on Capitol Hill. So you're likely to get something, dealing with enhanced kind of AML KYC aspects. Now, will that make it through? I don't know, but I think education, especially over the next year or two, is going to be critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see, there's groups like the Digital Dollar Foundation and also, forgive me, what is it, Crypto for Congress, that are, sort of these lobbying groups and other kinds of educational groups that work with lawmakers.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you've got several caucuses, the blockchain caucus. I think you have the fintech and payments caucus, among others, and certainly those are important. But it's just my concern is you have the usual suspects, which have done a lot in terms of promotion of crypto, digital assets related policy more generally on Capitol Hill. You've got a number of Republicans and Democrats in that kind of in that area, but it's a small portion of the 435 members of the House, right? And so, even though it's how do you, even though you engage with those guys, you're going to need to start, engaging and breaking out and speaking with other folks on the House side. And, it's great that you get the usual suspects in this space, but you still got to convince the other folks that this is the right way to go.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's certainly a difficulty. We'll see what happens. I think, from the election, you didn't lose. I don't believe you lost any of those kind of usual suspects in the policy space, which is a good thing. But at the same time, you've got more people moving into Congress now, and you still got to convince, 435, the other members of the House, including the Senate, that this is important, and we need to push forward, or we need to push back against a certain legislation.
Absolutely. Jackson, I want to thank you so much for your time. But before we go, can you tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find out more about you and more about Securrency? Yeah,
sure. I'm on LinkedIn, as I guess everybody else is around the world. So you can certainly find me there. To learn more about Securrency, we have a website, www.securrency.com. So feel free to reach out and connect with us through there as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure we have a lot more that we could talk about, but I feel like we've gotten so much today.
Just give me a call if you want to talk off the record.
Absolutely. Okay. For more news, events, and podcasts like this one, visit financemagnites.com. Thanks for listening.